I inhaled the gas, as the nurse said I should, for a long while. A long time passed, and then the dentist increased the percentage of pure gas. I remember I had palpitations, felt horror, anxiety, and that I couldn't move or adjust my vision. I felt sheer panic and remember, I wanted the nurse and dentist to see from the look in my eyes that something was terribly wrong with me. Then I heard a loud ringing sound like bells in my ears, which kept on getting louder. The sound continued, and I thought it sounded so awful. God, I have to wake up, I thought, because something terrible is going to happen. High anxiety. Then I remember I was in a dark place that seemed to be spinning around me, but after a while, I noticed it was me that was drawn forward at high speed towards a small light. I stopped there and felt rather sad because I thought I had really died, and I grieved the loss of my daughter, that I wouldn't be able to see her anymore. She was 7 years old at the time. I heard 2 different female voices talking to me. I don't remember everything they said, but it was a lot, and the sound came from behind me. I wanted to turn around but couldn't. They said, Madeline, the purpose of your life is, among other things, to try to have as much fun as possible, forget the sad things that happened and laugh and smile as much as you possibly can. Everything is going to be all right for you. Humor is very important, the 2 women said. I remember having a kind of sinking feeling in my stomach all the time, and it went on when I was drawn out of my body, and ended up in a corner of the room. From there I watched the other 2 who were working with me. In a second or so I was beside the right cheek of the dentist, and I could feel his beard brushing against my left cheek. It was a shocking experience to be so close to him without him seeing or feeling my presence. I heard them talking to one another, saying that I had stopped breathing. He said he would do heart massage, which he proceeded to do. I saw that all color drained from my face down below in the chair, and I got very scared. Then these bells came back in my ears and I felt the sinking feeling in my stomach even stronger. All at once, I was lying in the chair with the dentist hanging over me with a sweaty face. I started crying hysterically when I told them what happened to me. They were pretty calm about it and comforted me. He said he noticed that I was gone for a while, and that it can happen if the percentage of pure gas is wrong. He said he had it happen before. I went to a psychologist directly afterwards and talked about this experience. NDE 2. My thoughts were racing, my feelings ebbing and flowing, detached. I complied with inner feelings. My insides were saying sit down and be quiet, or risk alarming your sister. I knew she was sitting only a few feet away at the kitchen table. My head suddenly felt very large, I could hear my heart beat. The beat was pounding in a downbeat or decrescendo rhythm. I could now only see a warm orange glow that went to bright white as I felt myself floating away. I could see my body sitting slumped on the edge of the chair below me as I became surrounded by a warm, bright, summer sunshine sort of light. It felt warm. I was so happy in it. The experience felt just so wonderful. I cannot find words adequate to express my joy. Somehow, I knew that if I gave in to the feeling and stayed any longer, I would not be able to go back. To return to life. As soon as that thought occurred, my vision returned. The experience ended and I was back in my body looking at the living room. I was amazed and scared all at once. I thought, wow, hope that doesn't happen again. I was afraid to move. I became aware that I couldn't breathe. I was hyperventilating. I stuck my face in my shirt and tried to normalize my breathing. When I could breathe again, I stood up to go into the kitchen for a drink of water, and found I could only go a few feet without losing my breath completely. I took an aspirin and within 15 minutes or so was back to normal except for feeling very tired. I went upstairs to rest. The next day, Sunday, my right leg swelled and on Monday I went to the doctor. He called for an ambulance and I was immediately taken to a hospital and placed in the intensive care unit for clotting and all the embolisms. In the emergency room, the pulmonary doctor looked over me. In astonishment he said, "I can't believe you survived. You have blood clots in your lungs, and yet you lie there looking perfectly healthy. You know this is usually catastrophic. Those who do survive struggle to breathe, and yet you lie there breathing only room air. He shook his head and proceeded to tell me about the filter I needed to stop clots from getting to my lungs, and what else to expect. His words did not seem real. The doctors dubbed me as the guy who cheated death. Several doctors and all were in and out during the stay. I am now at home, recuperating and adjusting to blood thinners, trying to comprehend all that happened. It turns out I have a genetic disorder. Guess that is why I did not think much about what happened physically to me that Saturday. The lightness and hyperventilating has happened to me many times before. Not to the extent it did on Saturday. Besides, I had been to see the doctor for swelling and pain in my calves. He said it was just tight calf muscles and sent me for physical therapy. With all the pain my calf is in from the clots, and all the poking and prodding from the doctors, I wonder whether I cheated death or death cheated me. NDE 3. My grandmother's country home has a bridge in the front. The road is on one side, and the house the other. A bridge spans a wide creek. I was playing in the creek. I got into a sandy area, and I slid into a deep hole in the creek bottom. I was underwater. My father saw what happened from the front porch. He jumped in and tried to revive me. I remember going into water over my head and seeing the air bubbles go to the surface. Things went black for about 15 seconds. Then the scene changes. My family was standing around my body, my father giving mouth to mouth. I was above them floating. My vision was expansive. Like a cinemascope movie. I especially remember my grandmother navy polka dot dress. They could not see or hear me though. I wondered what was going on, what happened. Then I remember throwing up, and I was back in my body. I did not understand at the time what happened. But later in life, this NDE haunted me. I tried to get information and began reading about Edgar Cayce, psychics, NDE, etc. I started reading in the 1965 and stopped in the 1970s. Then picked up again in the late 1980s. I have read so much about life, death, the afterlife, and religions I came to the conclusion that no one really knows for sure. NDE 3. I was a 3-year-old child who reached into a fish aquarium and grabbed hold of an electric heater that had been inserted into the aquarium. The bulb broke and I was nearly electrocuted. When found by my parents, I was gray, ashen, and still being held by the electrical current. I was in severe distress and had serious burns to my left arm when I was taken by ambulance to the hospital. My recovery was long and painful, and I almost lost my left arm because of the accident. I remember hardly anything at all about the incident, except the feeling that I had left my body and was in a tunnel of light. As I got older, I began to have a feeling of increased spiritual awareness and reverence towards God. I also began to have feelings that are hard to describe, that seem to let me know of things intuitively that happen in the future before they unfold. I have had a second event recently, in 1998, in which I felt I left my body and met with my deceased grandmother. I was informed of the pending arrival of a son, who I did not we were going to have. In 1999, my wife gave birth to my son, as my long-dead grandmother told me in my dream. NDE 4. I recall sitting in the wall of the emergency section of the hospital, and watching the events separate from myself. The time seemed inconsequential and I was uninterested until a separate space opened in the room, and I left. After a hazy journey, seemingly short, I was enveloped in light and exquisite and infinite love. By now, I recall this as an ageless soul. I felt, as best as I can describe, in a state of total bliss. Once again, there is no language to convey feelings. There seemed to be a collective consciousness who welcomed me, but at the same time conveyed the knowledge that I was the one responsible for the decision to stay or go back. I recall these decisions not as a small child but a person with accumulated knowledge to evaluate the choice and make a decision. The decision to return was based on the knowledge that I was not finished in my life, and there were things to accomplish and fulfill. There was no distress at the thought of return, and once the decision was made, there was no more recall. NDE 5. I blanked out. At the same time, I felt myself go into a dark tunnel like a big tube. A light came from the direction I was going. In a distance I can see a bright white light. As I came closer, I can see a woman, who was radiating love. She was pure, white light, and a soft rainbow color came from her heart. She asked me to walk into her, which I did. I felt the magnetic energy of peace, unity, and love in its purest form. I remember thinking that this place is where I come from. She asked me to go in farther. I came across a wall of books that stood about 30 feet high, and went both ways as far as the eye can see. I went closer to read the covers. Energy poured from the wall and came into me. I can feel the energy emptying into me, like water, until it was just trickling stream. I started to pull away. The woman's beautiful voice told me that I could go back now. I came out of the woman and started back into the dark tunnel. I snapped back into my body so fast and gasping for air. The ambulance attendant jumped up. He came into the back of the ambulance and said, "We were taking you to cold storage," while putting on the wiring to the heart and oxygen. I went back to sleep for 2 days. I woke up in the ICU. A nurse was sitting to the right of me writing. I looked at her and knew all about her past, present, and future. When I looked out, saw the trees and Mother Earth, I felt the same. I knew her. I also began to feel pain when people came around or just passing by the room, emotional and physical energy. I can read energy. The energy that is flowing from the person shows me their past, present and future, emotional and physical. I can't explain it. I just know what to do. The psychology and energy is wow.